Good morning, everybody. Those of you who are joining us live, this is the Virtual Village Hall. This is Fiona Kyle, not really on my inspirational harping path today, maybe slightly inspirational. I usually do meditation and sometimes a harp request session, but today I am doing a session on Braille and discussing what Braille is and how it's used in everyday life. Please do pop your comments in the comments box. We've got the lovely Anna hosting us today as well, and Anna is going to read out any comments and any questions at my request, because I'm unable to read comments and questions while doing a live broadcast. So this is an interactive session. Absolutely, you can ask questions about any other aspects of visual impairment or blindness, and I'll talk a little bit about my sight loss as well, just to give you a little bit of context, and you can ask questions, and I've got a couple of things to demonstrate to you as well. So I suppose the first question we should ask ourselves is, what is Braille? And so many people ask that question. And Braille is really a tactile system. It's made up of 6 or 8 dots, and it's used for reading and writing, and they can be used for numbers. You can have Braille music. It's often used in mathematics as well. It can get very complex. The basic premise of Braille is that there are 6 dots or 8 dots, and these dots make up many different combinations of letters, numbers. I think there might be some photos, actually, Anna, I've just realised that you might want to put up during the session, which would show people what Braille actually looks like, because it's hard to explain. But it is a tactile reading and writing system, so people generally learn Braille with their fingers, although it can be sight read as well. And Braille was invented actually 200 years ago, which is why we're having this event to celebrate 200 years of Braille. I certainly wouldn't be able to do half the things I do without having some sort of Braille in my life. I learned it when I was quite young, and I will talk about that. So Braille was invented by a French educator called Louis Braille, and he became blind at the age of 3. He had an accident in his parents' workshop with a tool, and he poked his eye with it, and both of his eyes became infected, because obviously they didn't have the medication in the 1809, I think it was, he was born. So that kind of era, 16th, 17th century, to be able to save his sight. So he lost his sight, and he attended the school for blind youth in Paris, and there was an army officer that visited to talk about night blind things, codes that you could use at night time, and it was a different system, but Louis was kind of inspired by this code, and so he developed the 6 dots system, which allows people to read Braille with one finger, which is how you do it, which I'll show you how that's done as well. And so he continued on after school. He published his first Braille book at age 20, and he continued on educating and enlightening people with Braille and researching. And basically, he died at age 43 with tuberculosis, which again was something new to me. So it's quite a learning curve, really. So quite an amazing guy. So it's interesting to hear how he started and how he influenced people. Oh, sorry, I've just completely came out of the document I was in. Hang on. Oh dear. There we go. So how is Braille used in everyday life? So I suppose that's the next kind of thing I want to talk about. Sorry, I just had a notification in my ear, so I had to just listen there for a second. So my journey with Braille, with sight loss, I have been registered blind since birth. My sight loss was caused due to prematurity. So I was born quite a few months early, and my vision is pretty poor. It has been better in years gone by, where I could see colours and I could see outlines, but I could never see enough to read print except at a very, very, very high level. So I attended the Royal Blind School in Edinburgh, and prior to that I attended the School for the Blind in Jordanstown and Belfast in Northern Ireland, and I also attended primary school for a year before that. And the teachers really tried to, I did get introduced to Braille at primary school. They used to give me little tactile, they were like different surfaces, so like rough and smooth, and you could feel so to get my fingers used to feeling the tactile. And then I started learning Braille, and I remember she was like my assistant teacher, I suppose, auxiliary, what do you call them nowadays? I can't remember the proper term, but there was a classroom assistant that was assigned to me and did one-to-one work in primary, and she wrote out a book in Braille. I think it was like the Billy Goat's Gruff. Now, I don't know how many pages that would be in print. Say it was like 5 pages, for example. Well, I think she must have had like 20 pages of Braille for this one very short children's story, and she'd sellotaped it all and she gave it to me to read. And so I learned Braille that way to start with, and the alphabet. And my parents tried to learn with me, but it was too difficult. I just went at a much faster pace. I still have my very first Braille machine, which was what they call a Perkins Brailler. So if you can imagine a typewriter, I'm going to show you the note taker I've got here in front of me. This is the latest innovation. This is a a brilliant Braille display. I have a bigger version of this too, which is a bit different. But you might be able to see there are 8 dots, but we tend to use the 6 dots. So that's what the Perkins Brailler is. It's like a typewriter with these dots, and we've got a space bar. This has 2 space bars actually, but the Perkins has 1, and an enter key and a backspace. So it's like a typewriter, but it's loud, really loud and cumbersome. So you have big big cases to carry the things around in. So when I went to the blind school, both in Jordanstown and in Edinburgh, there were Braillers in each classroom, so you didn't have to lug it around. And it's quite interesting because the note taker thing has developed over the years, and I probably saw the first Braille note taker in about 1990, and it was a tiny little thing. It was probably even smaller than this one, and it had 6 keys, and it was a little, I think they called it a jotter or something, and it was so cute, but it didn't have a Braille display. So this has got if I turn it round, it's got a wee Braille display, and as I move you've got little thumb keys, which moves the Braille along, and it's got little cursor keys as well, which you can, if you're wanting to edit in your file, you can put the cursor key onto the letter and then you can backspace it. Or if you need to get to the end of your file, you can put the cursor key and it will blink to tell you that you're ready to write again. So, Braille's always been something that's been very much a part of my life. I think as technology has improved, we've got iPhones now. But this device that I've got here can actually connect up to an iPhone, so I can Bluetooth this device to my iPhone, and I can use my iPhone from this device. So I could go into an email, write an email, I can go into text messaging. It does require a bit of correction because my typing is fast, but my accuracy is rubbish. So I have to do quite a bit of editing if I do that to make sure that it comes out right, because then as soon as you send the text, because Braille has got what they call contractions, that's what a shortened version of each word sometimes, then if you bring it out in print, it can mean something completely different. So it gets very confusing. So you have to be careful when you're editing text, when you're going to write something in a text message, or even on Facebook, you've got to be careful that it's accurate, because it can take a wee bit longer. But I've certainly found over the years that I wouldn't want to be without Braille. I tend not to read Braille that much these days, as in read Braille books. I will tend to listen to audiobooks, but I will also use my note taker, for example. If I'm doing a course, like say for today, for example, I've got my notes for the session on this. So you don't know what they are. You don't need to know that they're not coming out on the iPhone. They're not being spoken. So that's not going to intrude on the session. You also... I could check the time, which I do frequently in meetings and things, or if I'm doing something, just to see, all right, how long have we got before I need to move on to the next thing. So I can do that quite discreetly, and nobody would know. So it is wonderful for that. It definitely still has its use in everyday life. So I'm going to ask Anna to come in and just see if there's any comments and questions, and then we'll kind of move on a bit to the next bit.
Hi Fiona, thank you for joining us today and
Pleasure.
all your fascinating backstory. Nobody's asking any questions at the moment, but there are lots of people joining us. So hopefully later on, when you've said a bit more, there'll be some questions that they'll want to ask.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's easy to talk about oneself for a little while longer, so we're all good. Thank you, Anna.
Sorry, we just have had a question pop through. Julie asks, is there only one Braille language?
Julie, okay. As far as I know, Braille is, it's worldwide, but Braille has been translated into many different languages. Now, I couldn't tell you how many. Certainly, obviously, French, the European languages for sure. So there are different Braille codes, I would say, for each language, obviously, to reflect the language itself. So if you're South African, there will be a version of South African Braille, and some of the note takers that I was talking about, my bigger note taker, which is charging at the moment, they all translate into various languages. So when you're setting it up, you go into a menu, and you can choose your own language profile. So if you wanted your numbers to be in Braille maths, you could do that, and you could have your Braille, your notifications, everything in English. So I think you can customize the Braille note takers to different languages. So as I say, yes, it definitely does translate into many different languages, which is great, because obviously all over the world there are people who are reading Braille, and often one of my older note takers actually got sent out to Africa, because although the technology moves on and it was slow, it was great for someone who was maybe learning Braille and needed to be able to have something electronic to read it on. It still worked, but it's just because we're so fast moving with our technology these days that it sort of had served its purpose for me. But I know they definitely send the company that I use most of all for my Braille products, they send them off to different parts of the world. So yeah, thanks for that, Julie. Lovely question. So I, as I say, learned Braille from the age of, I think, about 6. I had this massive big Perkins Brailler that the local Lions Club, I think it was, in Northern Ireland, that they fundraised and got me this big Brailler, and I still have it. I think it probably needs some repairs, but I would never part with it because it's part of my childhood. As I say, when I went to the blind schools, both in Northern Ireland and in Scotland, the Braillers were there already. So everything we did was, you would put a piece of thick Braille card into the Perkins and you would roll it, like a typewriter, you roll it in, and then it's got this little, again, like a typewriter, it's like a carriage return. So when it gets to the end of the line, it bings a little bell. So of course we'd all be typing away like mad, and ding, ding, all you heard was the little bells dinging. When we were doing our exams, I remember they had a device called a Braille and Print. So they had a big box that they put underneath the Brailler. They had to develop a certain Brailler for this purpose. So the Perkins had little sort of holes at the bottom that fitted into these. They were like plungers on the box. It was like a square box, so it sat underneath the Brailler, and for every 2 lines of Braille that we typed, it would print out, and it was one of the old laser printers, so it went, it was quite loud. So for our exams, that was one of the things that we did, so that the examiners, so you had to, again, be very careful. You couldn't go in and edit your exam paper. If you thought you made a mistake, you had to sort of deal with it straight away. And one of the things that they also had was Braille rubbers, like a Braille eraser, which had a little point on the bottom. I don't have one, but one of our teachers, I seem to remember, used to carry one around, and you could rub out your Braille mistake. But again, you had to be careful you didn't put holes in the paper. So all these very primitive things. Nowadays, I just hit a backspace key. I can select text like you would on Microsoft Word, and I just hit delete, and it goes. So it's all very very, very different. Things have moved on, but I definitely think there's still a place for Braille in this world, even though there is technology, because they are constantly moving the Braille technology forward as well. So yeah, when I left school, I studied social work. So I went to university, and I had a Braille note taker, which was what was it called? Braille and Speak. Oh yeah, it was a Braille and Speak. It was called. My friends affectionately called it Braille and Squeak. One of my friends still calls it Braille and Squeak, and I said it's not a Braille and Speak. It's a Braille. It's a Brilliant now I've got, and he's like, oh, sorry. So this device was a note taker, but it didn't have a Braille display, and so. And the funny thing was, when I went to college, the lecturers, because I could type quite fast, if they were dictating notes, they would keep up at my speed, and my speed was quicker than people who were handwriting. So I used to get like, oh God, everybody's keeping up with you and not us. So I had fun using that. Eventually I moved on to a Braille note, a note taker with a Braille display. But my dream really was to get one of the ones from this company called Humanware, and there are other companies available as well, but I really wanted a particular note taker that could use the internet, and eventually I got one that could use Facebook. I don't use Facebook on it because I do find it still a bit clunky, and I find the iPhone just so much quicker for lots of things. But I did use Facebook on it for a while, and you could like things and you could post things, but then when it got to posting photos and things, it became a bit problematic. I mean, the Braille Note Touch that I have is basically a Google tablet, which they've adapted and put they've got their own software and everything. So it's all very technical, but it is amazing that we can sit and Bluetooth. I can sit on the train with this little note taker, and I can Bluetooth it to my phone and type an email, or I can simply sit and type my to-do list if I want to. I use this little note taker for gigs when I'm playing the harp. And I have my set lists, and I got this little one because it's just such a cute little size. And the other note taker I have is very heavy and quite clunky, and this one just pops into my bag, and it's great, and I just pop it out beside me. And when I'm doing talks for guide dogs as well, I have my notes in front of me. When I'm doing training for guide dogs, because I'm a speaker trainer, I have my training notes that I use, and I can sit and chat on the internet with everybody on the call, and I have my note taker so I can keep up to date with what I'm doing. So I'm just going to ask Anna to see if there's any other comments or questions as we're going through.
Hi, Fiona.
Hello.
Julie says thank you for your answer to her question, and that your answer was fascinating. And Erin asks whether in-fashion slang words gradually make their way into Braille.
That's an interesting one, Erin. In-fashion slang words. Okay, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I suppose when you're kids and you get you get a new computer and it speaks to you and you get Braille, I suppose we all want to see what it sounds like when it swears. Well, I certainly did anyway. I guess if you know the words, you can write them. And obviously the contractions, as we call them, it might be interesting to think how would I type that, and how does it look, because the Braille codes do change. You've got Unified Braille, English Braille, you've got the American Braille code, so sometimes things look very different, and of course as we know, American spellings are different to English spellings, so I'm sure it would make its way in there if you actually just typed it somewhere or you wrote it. Yeah, I'm sure it would. I hope that's answered your question, Erin. So let me see where we are here. So as I say, I do use Braille in everyday life. One of the things that I often people often say to me is that they would love to be able to send me cards, for Christmas cards and birthday cards. So one of my friends, two of my lovely friends, religiously every year since I've known them, have sent me a birthday card in Braille and a Christmas card. So I'm going to show you just how I would read. This is not the card, but this is a description that came with it. So I'm going to show you just how I read Braille. This is what they call grade 1 Braille. So there's no contractions. So when you get Braille, you've got the alphabet. Every letter of the alphabet pretty much has a word. So A is for a, B is for but, C is for can, and so forth. And then as you add different combinations to those words, they become those letters, they can become numbers. They will become different words as well. So it is like learning a language, really. Like in French, if you add a certain thing to that, it becomes something, and then if you add something else to it, it becomes something else. So you have to learn all these things. So it really is like learning a language. But because I was age 6 it was like learning it was the first thing I ever learned. So for me, it was quite natural. And we were encouraged to try to read large print at school as well, but that had to be magnified many times for me to do that. So we were encouraged. And then later on, I feel like I'm backtracking, but it's quite important to note that because I learned Braille from the beginning, there were certain words that I didn't know how to spell. So things like receive, rejoice, upon, these things are all contracted in Braille. So there's a number of dots, and then there's a letter, the beginning letter of the word itself. So it's you sometimes don't realize how you spell. So then they had to teach us to touch type. And that really helped, because obviously I had to spell everything out. So the blind school were very, they realised that we were going to go into a world where people were not, if you couldn't get your essays in on time at university, that's your problem, whether you had the technology or not. So it was quite important that, we knew how to touch type, we knew how to use a computer, so that we could get our essays in the same time as the other students and be on another footing. And equally, with working in social work, I had to use computers, I had to learn how to use a database, I had to learn different things in order to sort of fit in. So while Braille is a means of access to learning and to reading, it's not necessarily, you still have to learn how to write, print, because you're going to be sending things out in a printed format, even if it's an email. So much as I say, I do use Braille for email as well, but I think it would depend on what the email was sometimes. And again, I have to be very careful with accuracy. So this is a card description. I'm just going to read this out to show you. So it's a card description, and the background, it says, is a brown stripy card with a curled up at the bottom right hand side, and at the top of the page, in white and gold foil, are the words "sending you special birthday wishes," and below this is a photograph of a little black poodle, and the poodle is sat in a meadow with lots of flowers, and behind it is a photograph are some pink packing paper with the paw prints on it. And dotted around that, or as the rest of the card, are little stars with embellished with gold foil. So as you can see, as I'm reading this, I'm not going to read anymore because it's kind of, as I'm reading, I'm following with my right hand, and then the left hand is at the bottom, so that I'm keeping. Now, ideally, I suppose we probably would have read with two. Sorry, that's folded over. Read with two hands, and then, so that's how you read. That's how I'm reading Braille. So, and it is weird because it's not contracted, so it takes a minute or two to think, what word is that? I once got a hymn book done in Braille. My sister knew someone who was blind, and she sat with him, he worked with her, and we brailled out this hymn book. And the first, it was a Christmas time, and the first carol was "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." Now, you know that there are big words in that, right? Like Godhead and highest, and I'm like, what? And I'm sitting with my mum, and I must be about age, I don't know, 8 or 9, and I'm trying to read this thing, and it's in grade 1, and I'm like, I don't understand this, and I had to keep spelling the words out to read it. So that's how you read Braille, essentially, on a bit of paper, on a bit of card. That is how you read it. So of course, Braille is used in everyday life. It is used on things like some medications, and it's used on some food products, not many, and it's around. But people say, oh no, if it was in Braille, would it make it easier? Well, the thing is, you can't, unlike sighted people, we can't go along and scan the shelf and look for Braille. You can't do that. You'd be standing at the shelves for ages trying to feel along. So it does help when you're putting products away that sometimes you know what they are, especially for medications. I was at an event in Parliament recently and someone was talking about this, and she said, but I wish the people in the chemist wouldn't cover up the Braille labels. And I was like, yeah, here, this is what often happens. So like I have got, I'll tell you what this is. It is powder force. Okay, so it's given you quite a lot there. But it's a Lemsip basically. It's cold and flu. I'm just trying to find out how to read the thing. Yeah. Where does it read it? Oh yeah. So it's a Lemsip sort of thing. So it's great because that's in Braille, and of course if you put it in the medicine cabinet, you know where to find it. So that is really useful. Anna, how are we doing? Have we any more questions or comments?
Hello. We're doing well, thank you. So Anne-Marie has added a comment, adding a little bit more information about Braille in different languages, and she says that your talk is really fascinating, Fiona. And Julie asks, do you use Braille to learn the music that you play on your harp, or is that all done by ear?
Ah, good question, Julie. Yeah. Thank you, Anna. Well, personally, no, I don't use Braille music. I think it was one of these things that it was never really. I think when I started to learn the harp, I learned in the traditional way, which is by ear, and so Braille music never really came into it. I suppose because I've always played by ear as a kid. I guess if I was taking Braille exams, music exams, maybe it might have been encouraged. Our teacher did go over it a little bit, and it is there, and it is possible to learn music, to learn music with Braille music. Personally, I think because you still have to learn the pieces, because you can't sight read, so I mean, even people who sight read still have to learn the pieces. It's not everybody that can sight read a piece and play it. So I kind of felt that really I would be using my memory anyway, and yes, you might say, well, but you could learn a piece, you could get the music, it would be accessible. But nowadays, I've never read music, as I say, because I learned harp in the traditional way, which is to learn a piece by ear, and that's how I was taught. I've never really felt the need. When I do arrangements for weddings, which is where most of my music goes, nowadays we can listen to music on YouTube or on our smart devices, and so I learn by ear, and it makes it much easier for me, because sometimes with music, as musicians know, some people can't get away from the page. Once you learn to read music, it becomes very difficult to sort of diversify from that. So I'm quite lucky, because I've learned in the traditional sense, I can play a piece in the way that I like to play it and feel it could be played. So yeah, simple answer to that, Julie, is I personally don't use Braille music, but it is there for people, and I know some people that do, and I know some people that learned it at school and were told they had to learn it at the blind school. That was after my time. So but it certainly is useful to have, and they do publish it, so that is certainly helpful. So let me see where we are. So yeah, I mean, there are still Braille books being produced, but they are quite expensive. So I think some of the organisations nowadays produce Braille books, as in when you on sort of a need basis, because the Braille take up so much space. I mean, I've got one of the Harry Potter books. I think it was the second last one, and it's about 20 volumes of Braille, so it's quite big. You can imagine the Order of the Phoenix, that would be huge, because it was like 30 hours of listening. So it is much handier and much more relaxing to have an audiobook, and you can just sit back and. But again, if you're happy to be read to, which I always have been. So you can use Braille books. You can get some, obviously, if you get a product from some of the organisations like the Royal National Institute of Blind People, they will provide Braille instructions, and sometimes that's really handy just to have a physical thing to actually read. And sometimes I find if I'm reading something, if I need to learn something or take in something, I find it easier to read it in Braille than to listen to it, which is very interesting. Probably because Braille was the first medium that I actually used in order to learn anything. And Braille is certainly being used more electronically. I mean, these devices are not they're not cheap, but they are so useful. I can have someone email me a document, and I can just send it to the note taker, either using an SD card or USB, or I can have it at my fingertips ready to read. So if I'm doing a course, sometimes I'll ask them to send me the course materials, and it's really handy to have them, maybe a day or so before, so that I can sit in and sort of mull over them, which really helps. I think as well, Braille is one aspect of my life, but obviously there are many things that I use to help with my blindness, and so there may be other questions around that. Obviously, I have my long cane, which is a mobility aid, and I also have my wonderful guide dog Gus, who I'm sure I've spoken about on the Virtual Village Hall on occasions. Gus is coming up for 9 now, and he will be retiring. So once I get a new dog, then I'll maybe come on and do a little talk and sort of introduce you, because that is one of the things I do for guide dogs. I'm a guide dog speaker. I did do a talk on here quite early on in my VVH career, and that was great, and I would definitely come on and do that again, and because I would have some photos of the new dog and talk about the training, and I think that would be quite interesting to do. Some of the things that people ask about is, how do you know what you're wearing? I go and do talks to children, they're fascinated. So I have a little device. I do have different apps on my phone. So there's things like Be My Eyes, which is like an app that you can take a photograph of your space and it will tell you what's in your space. It'll say, there's a harp in the corner, there's a wooden floor, there's a mat with some dog toys on it, there's a person sitting wearing a red jumper, that kind of thing. So it tells you. So if I'm not sure what I'm wearing on a given day and I want to know what the description is, I will use the Be My Eyes app to take a picture. So this is a little colour device. I'm just going to switch it on, and the kids love this.
Ready, light grey.
Yeah, okay.
Light grey. Red.
Put it against me. Hopefully it'll behave itself. It's not today. Come on. It knows it's on camera, you see. Right.
Red.
Ah, thank you.
Red. Red.
So it's telling me I'm wearing a red top, which I did know, actually, because I don't organise my wardrobe. I mean, people would think, oh yeah, a blind person, you have all your red things and the one thing, and no, it's an absolute disgrace. It's slightly more organised now, because when we take out when you switch from winter to summer, I tend to look and I have somebody with me usually, and they'll say, right, what top's that? Right, that's your pink top with yellow daisies or whatever it is. Oh yeah, right, I know that one. So I know by the feel most of the time for my clothes, but I did know this top's red because it's I haven't worn it very often. So, and I know by the feel of it and the shape of it that it's a red top. So that is one of the things that I use for colours, and Be My Eyes is great for like cooking instructions if you want to know how to cook something, if you bought a ready meal, that kind of thing. And of course Gus, my guide dog, is instrumental in so many things, helping me get out and about, helping me get to places. We took him for a walk this morning, used my cane to get around the park, put the harness on, walked him back. We walked back towards home, went and had a coffee, came home, and that's amazing. That's independence. It's like being able to do that at a moment's notice, not having to think, either taking the cane, which is okay, and I could still go for a coffee myself. I wouldn't probably have the same inclination, but I could do it. And sometimes you have to do it if the dog's off sick, but being able to use a guide dog and just thinking, right, let's go and we'll go and have a coffee, we'll go and meet so-and-so for lunch, we'll go get on the train and go to Aberdeen and meet somebody, or we'll go to the theatre, or all these things I can do because Gus is with me. And although he doesn't know his way around everywhere, of course he can't, he'll still walk in a straight line and he'll still get me. And sometimes I think the dogs, because a lot of the shops are the same nowadays, if you go into Starbucks in Edinburgh, it's probably going to look something similar to the Starbucks at home. So he'll probably have an idea. And I think he has recognised some of the shops when we've been other places. He's taken me into a shop. He's very good at that. He loves finding shops, which is really helpful when I need to know where somewhere is. So I'm going to ask Anna to pop in and see if there's any more questions or comments.
Hi, Fiona.
Hiya.
So, well, first of all, I would like to say I'm sure on behalf of all the virtual villagers, we'd love to meet Gus's successor when you have your next dog in the future. So yes, please to that.
Yes, yes.
And I've got a couple of comments. First of all, Erin, who asked the question before about the slang terms, she's had to leave us now, but she wanted to say thank you so much and that everything that she's heard has been really interesting.
Oh, good.
And then there are a couple of questions. Firstly, from Jill. Well, Jill's is more of a comment, really, but I think you'll be interested. She says she is sighted, but she worked at the RNIB Students' Braille Library in the early 80s, translating student textbooks and exam papers on a Perkins.
Oh my God.
She loved it, except the legal documents and bell ringing manuals, which were so repetitive.
Oh God, that must have been tedious. Oh, and a Perkins as well. Oh my God. Jill, you are a legend. You're an absolute legend. I mean, I can just imagine having to sit and document, to actually do, to write from the printed page onto, oh God, that must have taken forever. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, nowadays we have, the other thing to say is we have Braille embossers, which are brilliant. So you can actually, I had a thing at work once, which was called a Mountbatten Brailler. It was like a machine gun. It was like really fast, but you could actually emboss. You could print off things. So if I needed something for a meeting, I could actually print it off in Braille. So that was cool. Just took up so much blooming paper though. Yeah, amazing.
We've got another question from Julie as well. And Julie asks, what will Gus do after he retires?
Okay, I will answer that. Is there any other questions, or is that?
That's it for the moment. That's the last one for now.
Okay, fabulous. That's fine. Yes, we'll talk about that. Yeah, absolutely. I love this. This is why I thought, I know it's about Braille, but actually there's so many other aspects to visual impairment that, Braille is one of the things. But yeah, so when Gus retires, there are always options. When we obviously we talk about retirement when it looks like it might be happening. It does take a while to plan it, because unless, for goodness, there's an emergency and something happens to the dog and it has to retire straight away, which would be devastating. Fortunately for all my dogs, yeah, all of them, I've been able to plan retirement. I think the first dog in particular, it was quite quick, because we didn't expect her. I said to them that she wasn't well, and that we should they look for another dog, and another dog came up very quickly between the first and second dog. So in that instance, I knew that I couldn't. I've always known with all my dogs, I've never been able to keep them myself. So there's always options. There is the option to keep your own guide dog if you have the space and if you have someone to take it out, because you can't work your current guide dog and take your retired guide dog out together, i.e. me working new dog in harness and having my older dog beside me. So I would have to either use my cane, take both dogs on the lead, which would be an absolute nightmare, or have someone to come and take the dog out, the older dog out for me. So because I only live in a small flat, I have no room for two dogs. Okay, for a holiday, for a week or so while the owner is away, yes, I can look after two dogs. I have done that and I quite enjoy it, but it's hard work. So there's always been the options of me not keeping the dog. So my first dog, we checked it out. We sort of asked my mum and dad, and they were like, no. And then I asked the puppy raisers, who are the people that keep the dog for the first year, and I've been in touch with all my puppy raisers throughout all my dogs' careers, and I thought maybe they would like her, and they said unfortunately no, they couldn't have her for whatever reason. So I was a bit stuck. And I was working at the time in social work, and I went into the team meeting and mentioned that my dog was going to be retiring. And later on that day, one of my colleagues, who hadn't showed a huge interest in Velma, but had got her a toy at Christmas, which I thought was really sweet. And he did like her. He used to work for guide dogs. He worked as a rehabilitation officer, so he did a lot with the long cane training. He knew about guide dogs. And he came up to me later in the day when it was quiet, and he said that him and his wife would be interested. So what we did was we nominated them as a possibility, and guide dogs did a home check, and all happened very quickly. And when I was ready to go off and train with my second dog, we actually they came over like on the day before and took my dog away. And then I was kind of on my own for that evening, and then I went off and got my second dog. And since that time, the gaps between me getting my dogs have been very quick. Whether it will happen this time round remains to be seen. Literally, I have gone from one dog to one dog to one dog, maybe with a week's gap. And I've always had people who have come forward in the strangest of ways. And it's been the same with Gus, actually. I wasn't sure who was going to have Gus. I'd sort of sounded out a few people who were like, well, you know, we might be travelling, or we don't think we want another dog just at the moment. You know, people who maybe lost dogs, you know, because we knew it would take a year or so in the planning, because it takes a while to find the next dog. So guide dogs want to ensure as best they can that there's going to be no gaps between your current dog and the next dog that you get matched with. So at the moment, last August, we were at an event and this lady spoke over to me and she said, "Oh, your dog's beautiful." And I said, "Oh, this is Gus." And she said, "We've just lost ours a couple of months ago." And I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry." And she was a German Shepherd, and she said a German Shepherd cross lab, and she said he looks like her. And I was like, "Oh gosh." And I said, "Well, Gus is retiring actually, and you know, when another dog becomes available." And she said, "Oh," and you know, we just had that moment of going, "Oh gosh," you know, without saying I'll have him or anything like that. And so we said, "Well, maybe we should, you know, meet for coffee sometime at a dog walk." So that was fine, and we met for coffee with her husband. Then she said, "Would you like to come to the house?" And they literally live 2 minutes round the corner from me. You couldn't make it up, honestly. And so we went round and had coffee at the house, let Gus out in the garden. He mooted around. At one point I was like, "Where is he?" Because he just disappeared off to his wee self, and as if he'd always been there. And so I said to the couple, you know, I don't know if you're interested, but if you did, you know, you could go on the website. And she said, I've done it. I've been on the website. I've had a look. And she said, if no one else wants to take him, we would possibly take him. And I was like, oh my God. So she put the application through, she was approved, and so we're just waiting now for dog number 5. If, for example, we didn't have anyone for Gus or any of the guide dogs, and as I say, I've been so fortunate that people have come forward just at the right time when we've needed them to, guide dogs would rehome that dog. So Gus would go off to someone, they would come and take him, and I wouldn't know where Gus had gone, which breaks my heart. I don't know if I could do that, but obviously sometimes there aren't people. And so guide dogs will rehome the dog, but you can request, apparently, when the dog is being rehomed, that the new owner would update you. So it's very similar to when the dogs go from puppy raisers to training dogs. The hope is that the guide dog owners we were given the details of the people who raised the dogs as puppies, and obviously we're expected to make one phone call at least. Doesn't mean we have to be bosom buddies or anything like that, but I think it's courteous to do that, because these people have given up their time and their house and their good possessions to these dogs, to puppies. And I think for retired dogs too, if your dog's going to someone, you really hope that they would keep you up to date as to how the dog is doing, and maybe get a chance to see it on occasion. So I will definitely get to see Gus when he retires. The hope is that he will meet with new dog and we'll go for runs together. And we certainly did that with my last dog. All the dogs met the next dog, and we would have days together, and it's lovely. It's like meeting up with an old pal, and then they go back to their life, you go back to yours, you get used to a new dog, and the cycle continues. But it's a beautiful thing to be able to meet with your older dog and your new dog, and it's just an absolute joy. And as I say, I've had the dogs, mostly Jerry, my last dog, she slept over a lot, and there was a bit of competition, because Gus would be trying to push in, and Jerry's like, I was here first. And but I think it was lovely to have them. I would sit on the floor with them and just be with the both of them, and it was honestly it's absolute joy. So I hope to get to do that again. So I hope that answers your question, Julie. A bit long-winded, I know, but you can't just answer it in the space of a few seconds. It takes a wee bit to explain. How are we doing, Anna? Any more questions or any comments?
There is another comment from Jill, who was the lady who was telling us that she used to work at the RNIB Students' Braille Library.
Yeah.
So Jill has added that the proofreading was far more boring than the brailing,
Right.
because exam papers had to be double proofread.
Oh
And she
gosh.
says they worked in pairs to proofread, one person sighted, one blind.
Wow.
And she says diagrams were fun too, using sandpaper, bits of wire, card.
That's right. Yes, yes. Wow, yes. I wonder, did she have the thermoform stuff? They used to use this. It was like static. It was like papery stuff, and it went through like a heat machine, and they would go on to the. It was amazing. Diagrams are amazing. You can't get 3D things. You know, they're quite. It's quite difficult to do that, especially for mathematics and really complicated things. No, what an amazing job! An amazing job. I met someone when I was doing this gig in Parliament a few months ago to celebrate 200 Braille 200. Once I'd finished my set and everything was finished, I was up still on the stage, and I had the harp there, and I met this young chap, and he came forward and he asked could he talk to me, and I said, what do you do? And he said, I'm at the Scottish Braille Press, which is in Edinburgh. And I said, wow, what are you doing there? And he said, I proofread. And I said, oh my gosh, that must be such a chore and such a difficult, hard enough to do when you're sighted, but when you're blind as well. And my friend Liz was in the background, and she worked in transitions for the RNIB. So one of her jobs was to help young people to transition from school to college, which is huge, or university, or even just moving on from school. And she recognised the person that I was speaking to, and so she asked me afterwards, what did he say he did? And I said, he's at the Braille Press and he's proofreading. And she said, his mother told her that he would never work. So interesting. I think my parents were very much that I should not be shut in the corner and that I should be out and about, which is why I'm always out. And then they tell me off for not being home when I, oh, you're never in. It's like, well, that's your fault. I was made, my parents were busy with various commitments growing up, and I was always out. My dad used to teach, well, they both taught first aid in the local college, and so sometimes in the summer holidays I got dragged in to be casualty and thrown about the floor. Sometimes I would do little talks for the HNC and social care students because my dad knew the course coordinators, so I got dragged in to do talks. And I've always been one of these people that's been sociable, and I love to talk about the whole blindness thing. It's fascinating and it's interesting, and I think it raises people's awareness, and if it can do that, then that's brilliant. That's how it should be. People should know about everything, but sometimes the only way you find out is speaking to the people that are going through it, because you can't always know any other way, I think. So it's interesting that different parents have different expectations of their children, and you can get the other side where parents can be almost overprotective and stifling, and not let the child be independent. And certainly that wasn't how my parents were, thank goodness, which has made me into the person that I am now, wanting to be out and about, just wanting to live life as anyone else does, and life is the variety for me, as well as playing the harp. I'm out doing talks for guide dogs, I'm out doing meditations with the harp in person, and sometimes I'm out going to the gym and doing exercise. I'm out meeting up with friends. So life is varied, and I thank my dogs for that, and I suppose to some degree my parents as well, my upbringing, all of that kind of stuff. So how are we doing? Any more questions, Anna, or comments?
Not at the moment, Fiona. And I wanted to say, though, how pleased I am to hear that it sounds like you will be able to continue to see Gus once you've got your new dog in the future. It's lovely to think that you'll be able to maintain that relationship with him, even when he's not working with you anymore.
Oh, absolutely. We'll be like old friends, and it'll be lovely to see him relaxed. And not that he's not relaxed now, but I think the responsibility for a dog, and it is difficult. It is a responsibility. It's teamwork. People say, oh, these dogs are so... Someone said to me this morning, these dogs are so well trained. I said, they are, but I said, they're actually only as well trained as guide dogs will train them up to a standard. And we have to go through training. Every dog we get, we have to go through training. So even though you've had 6 dogs, well, I've had 4 and nearly 5, I still have to go through the training again because it changes. It's a bit like people say about having children. It used to be you didn't give them a dummy, then you did, then you turned them on their back, then you turned them on their stomach. Things change, ethics change, childcare changes, dog training has changed over the years. So we have to be up to date with that, because the new dog will have different commands to what Gus had. There'll be some that are the same, but depending on who's trained him or her, it might be as simple as something to say like find the box instead of finding the post, or there'll be differences, and the training changes as time goes on. So yeah, no, it's great. I am so pleased I'll be able to see Gus. That I couldn't. It would be difficult for me if I couldn't see my dogs once they retired. So yeah. So we've got a wee bit of time, I think. I'm wondering, Anna, should we do some harp? What do you think?
I think it would be lovely for us to hear some harp to finish the session, Fiona. Yes, please.
Okay, right. Well, I have 2 tunes, so I'm going to get the harp organised, and then we'll. So bear with us, everybody. Just going to have to do a bit of manoeuvring because I've got my little. I've got little Keres harp. So Anna, I've got 4 harps because you don't do the sessions. You've never done a session with me before, so I've got 4 harps, and so I always. There's always one in the virtual village hall, and everybody's probably guessing which one have we got, because there's Charlotte and Ellie and Orla and Keres, and Orla and Keres are little, just make sure this is the right way around. Yes, it should be that way. Orla and Keres are lap harps or travel harps. So I'm going to use Keres because she's made in France, so of course we have to use the French. Let's get headphones right here. Because we're talking about Braille and we're talking about Louis Braille and the French connection, I thought we would use Keres today. But I should take my headphones off for a second just to get her understand, because I can see things going pear-shaped. Let's put them there. Right, lady, let's get you still here. Let's get that organised. Right. So I need to move around, but at least we're. So I don't know if I'm in shot or not still because I've moved a wee bit. So I might need you, Anna, just to confirm that can be seen still. I've moved away from the. Yeah.
That's perfect, Fiona. We can see you and we can see Keres.
Yay! So Keres is what they call an Odyssey harp. So she's a little bit of an adventurer. I'm just going to make sure I'm in the right key. Sounds all right. Yep. So she's a little travel harp. So she comes on the train with me because she's light, and she can be in it. She's got a good sturdy case, so she doesn't have to lean up against things. She can sit on the floor, and I've got a little stool for her just now, but I probably will get legs eventually. So the tune I'm going to do 2 tunes. They're both French tunes. The first one is Vie En Rose. So Keres, because she was bought when I was in Wales, just after I had a visit to Wales, and there's a lovely group of people that I meet up with sometimes, and some of us are from different parts of the UK, different parts of the world. We're a dynamic harps virtual ensemble, but we have met in person. We made a CD. We met in Cardiff last year for the Harp Festival, and I decided to buy this little harp just after we came back, and I thought I'd call her Keres because Keres is a nice Welsh name, and I liked it. So this is Vie En Rose. Thank you very much. And so the final tune I'm going to do is a French pop song from the 80s, and it's called Voyage Voyage. And I learned this especially for the Scottish Parliament gig, which was back in January. And in the middle of that gig, I did a harp retreat as well, which was the best of fun. So it's a lovely memory to have, because January is a horrible month. So it's great to have the memory of what we did there. So this is Voyage Voyage. Make sure that we put it off, yeah. Thank you so much. I'm just going to move the harp, so just bear with me 2 seconds, and then we'll just finish off the session. Anna, how are we doing?
That was beautiful, Fiona. Thank you so much for playing us those pieces. It's gorgeous, so relaxing.
Oh, well, you see, you can't have a VVH session without the harp. It just doesn't sound right.
Absolutely not. I'm so glad that you had time to fit that in. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad we had time. Is there any more questions or comments before we finish off?
No other questions. Yvonne has commented on your beautiful playing, said that she was enjoying it very much, but there are no other questions at the moment. So
okay, well, I think I've hopefully said everything that I think I need to say at the moment, and I just want to thank the VVH for hosting me, and to Andrea for giving me the idea to come on and do a Braille session, because I know that obviously sign language, there are some sessions on that. So I'm glad to have been able to host something, and maybe there's something else we can do, in the future, if people are maybe interested in learning a bit more about the alphabet and how it works and things. But I think it's been a really good overview session of what Braille is, and just a nice way to celebrate the fact that it's 200 years. So I shall be back at the end of May. You're getting a second dose of me this month, so you lucky lot. I'll be back doing meditations. It will be for Dementia Week, so it'll probably be a slightly shorter session. But I'm glad to be able to do it, and I do love being on this online virtual village hall. It's brilliant, and there's so many things that people can do. So I'd like to thank the lovely Anna for hosting me, and I will see you all again in the end of the month. And take care, and there might be some new harp news by then as well. So I'll keep you posted. All right, lots of love, everyone, from myself and Mr. Gus and Keris the harp. Take care. Bye for now.